directly or indirectly. State security apparatus, mainly the police and other assassins, were often in the front line in the mass attacks and in the murders. Now, I broaden this because if police themselves in uniform were not said to be involved, but still state apparatus in the form of other assassins associated with the state would be involved. Even other killers taken from various formations in the province would be co-opted or recruited or directed and used in these particular killings.
By the state?
By the state at that time. Towards the close of the 80s and beyond the unbanning of the previously banned political organizations, including the African National Congress, the state exacerbated and fully exploited differences between the UDF-COSATU alliance and Inkatha. They were fully conscious of the existence of these formations, political formations, yes, in KwaZulu-Natal in particular. They knew the sentiments that were shared by all of them and the feelings they had about each other, and then they exacerbated the differences between them, and they exploited those differences to fan the fires of violence, consciously so. When the ANC, therefore, was unbanned in 1990, together with other organizations, the province in almost all the four corners was already in fire. KwaZulu-Natal police were now very visible as an extension of the state security machinery and highly involved in the political conflict in the province.
Mr. Mchunu, you said KwaZulu-Natal police, perhaps?
No, KwaZulu police, not KwaZulu-Natal.
I think that is more appropriate.
KwaZulu police, yes.
Thank you.
They were, by the time the ANC was unbanned, together with other organizations that had been banned, they really were busy building a profile in the eyes of the community, including those of us who were in the ANC, accumulating a profile of involvement in the political conflict between the ANC and the IFP. As police, and that's why I talk about them as an extension of the rogue security apparatus of the state.
Yes.
That is South Africa at that time. I could count a few just large-scale incidents of violence, like the 7-Day War in Maritzburg in March 1990. I can refer to other mass killings as well in the same Midlands area towards the close of the 1980s. Shobane massacre in 1995, I think I'm correct. And the killing fields of Mandini.
Yes, it was on Christmas Day, 1995.
Yes, Christmas Day in 1995. And in other words, on the 25th of December, 1995. And then the killing fields of Mandeni, Macambini area as testimony of this kind of conflict in KwaZulu-Natal.
Yes.
Now, let me summarize it this way for the benefit of the Commission and everybody interested in this. In this conflict, we in the ANC always, and I mean it, always felt we were justified in defending ourselves and our cause in the greater scheme of things. In other words, that when you establish formations like defense units, for instance, you were justified in doing so because there would be individuals, there would be families, there would be villages, there would be townships that would be targeted for murder or assassinations or mass killings for their known sympathy with the African National Congress.
Mr. Mchunu, you say as the ANC you felt justified in defending yourselves against who or against what?
Against, that's where I'm going.
Okay, proceed, proceed.
I want to say the state and its machinery was always the enemy against which we needed to defend ourselves. In other words, the apartheid state up to 1994 was our main enemy, and we were clear about it, very unambiguously. The state and its machinery, all of it, in whatever manifestation, it was our enemy. And maybe for the benefit of everybody else, in the ANC, the IFP was never an enemy, so to speak. We always looked beyond it. We always looked at ourselves and the IFP as a victim of a state-driven kind of conflict and resultant tension and violence. And they were doing this deliberately. And among the cases, I think the Makuta case, in which Malan was then Minister of Defense and so on, those are some of the things that were pointers, useful pointers, to where violence was masterminded. It was neither masterminded by the ANC nor the IFP,
Yes.
even though I say KwaZulu police got their own profile through their own involvement, but they were not self-driven in this. They were driven
I understand.
in this kind of conflict. So, but on the other hand, the IFP, from our interactions with them in meetings and so on, we got to understand that they felt that they were under attack from the UDF, they were under attack from the ANC later on, SDUs, and from COSATU. That was their feeling, and this is what we got from our interacting with them. So, on our side, we felt that we were under attack from the apartheid state and its machinery, using whatever they could use, including conflict between the ANC and the IFP. On the other hand, our understanding of the IFP at that time, their attitude, their utterances, it was that the ANC was their enemy. And of course, this perception on their side, as we understood it over time, included a defense of what they perceived as their turf,
Yes.
which was otherwise getting invaded by these other forces led by the African National Congress. And I must say, further submit that at this period, especially the close of the 80s up to December 1996, there was a lot of proliferation, if I'm using the correct English word, proliferation of firearms and ammunition, distribution of these apparatus in the province, almost freely available. KwaZulu-Natal is the only province that in the Republic of South Africa that ever received 7 tons of arms and ammunition at one stage, as information got made available to all of us. 7 tons of arms and ammunition at one point.
Mr. Mchunu, excuse me if I'm interjecting prematurely. If you're going to deal with it, that's fine. Who was distributing these arms, or where were they from?
It was the state and its machinery.
Giving it to who?
It gave it to the police and I would say KwaZulu police. I would say identified military kind of formations that had come to the fore. Any formation that would be available to them, and they knew those, information was always available to them. They would distribute these firearms in one way or the other. It's no exaggeration to say that at some point you would be very much afraid of existing firearms and ammunition than being afraid of who would carry them. You would just get terrified that there are firearms all over and anybody can lay their hands on them and you would fall victim. Now, I want to conclude at this particular level by saying, perhaps with hindsight, one way the ANC and the IFP would have averted this heavy conflict during which the province lost and families lost their loved ones, numbering thousands. Never mind how many times we pointed fingers at one another.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is that there was blood and bodies in this province. So I'm saying the only way we could perhaps have avoided that would have been Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi admitting that at one stage, having been part of the African National Congress, because at some point he was a member of the Youth League of the ANC.
Yes.
Perhaps it could be him admitting that he abandoned at some stage the revolutionary liberation movement for some reasons, and maybe he could have stayed within the liberation movement, the revolutionary liberation movement. But also by the ANC admitting that perhaps more discussion, more understanding, more communication, more interaction would have worked better in terms of averting what later became this conflict. If this could have been done at the end of the 1970s, at the beginning of the 80s, I think the crucial years that we lost would have been 1978, 1979, 80, 81. Those were the crucial years that we lost. If leadership at the highest level at that time, Inkosi Mangosuthu Phelezi on one hand, maybe the president of the ANC, OR on the other. But I'm saying maybe there wasn't enough time on the side of the ANC being in exile and faced with a mammoth of task of driving the ship of liberation in the country. Perhaps there wasn't enough time dedicated solely to this cause. And there wasn't space to deal with it fully and perhaps anticipate the consequences of the non-availability of time and space to deal with this, to close the gap between the ANC and that. I think with hindsight, that could have been the only way we could have averted this thing which liberals termed black on black violence, which we in the ANC don't accept as a proper definition of what happened in the 80s and the 90s.
By that point, Mr. Mchunu, am I understanding you correctly? You as the ANC are not accepting that if you look beyond the foot soldiers who are perpetrating the violence. In other words, you are saying, no, not black on black, given that the state machinery and its apparatus was behind it.
The ANC exists today in KZN. The IFP still exists in KZN.
Yes.
We could still be fighting. We could still be fighting if we were fighting on our own, ordinarily.
I understand you.
But we argue and will always argue and even submit evidence, if need be, that the apartheid state and its machinery was on the driver's seat on this conflict. Whether it got through the IFP or through any other means, you know the story about Askaris, you know the story about other police operators and so on. So we argue our point from that point of view.
Yes.
But I'm saying, apart from that, if there had been clear anticipation, time allowing, the environment allowing, both for the ANC and the IFP, the ANC operating from exile, driving its core mission, which was the liberation war, or in other words, the liberation struggle,
yes,
and the fight for freedom. That was the focus. But if there was space and time and a conducive environment, perhaps there could have been more discussion, more interaction, and more of the discussion even at the highest level, if there was full anticipation of what lay ahead between the ANC and the IFP. And this could have averted the bloodshed that we saw in the 80s and in the first 5 years of the 1990s.
Your point is clear. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's my introduction and background. I now need to move to 2011.
Yes.
All right. I just want to say in passing, from the beginning of 1997, though, up to 2011, political killing remarkably decreased, surging only around particular periods. That is during general election, during local government election. So whenever you had an election, during the campaign and up to the day, there would be a surge of violence. Otherwise, up to December 1996, the so-called political violence really subsided,
Yes.
including in the hotspots, if I could use that particular word. I then make a point that says peace processes involving political parties, churches, non-government organizations, and prominent individuals in our province and elsewhere played an important role in changing the situation for the better. That is from 1996, or even from 1994 onwards. There has, however, never been any organized big dialogue to intensify and consolidate peace involving the same people. And I say, I think this is an unfortunate omission up to now. We could, from 1994 or even from 1996 or even later, have said, we still need maybe a bi-yearly, a biannual kind of gathering, maybe 2 days at a time, where we meet as role players, various role players in the province, dialogue with an objective of intensifying a peace, intensifying understanding, consolidating and broadening understanding of democracy in our province, using that past experience and infusing this into the new generation and actually taking on board everybody throughout our province and dialogue. Instead, what we do now is every time there's going to be elections, we form some committee of political parties under government, and then we monitor violence and so on. This is reacting only to what would have happened in the past or in that particular. But there hasn't been a deliberate effort or decision on our part to say, let us dialogue, let us intensify, let us create a platform, let us educate, let us consolidate democracy and broader understanding thereof. I think it's an omission.
Mr. Mchunu, you are obviously aware that ultimately we will ask for your recommendations. Let me do this prematurely. This point you are making about the omission and the lack of proactivity, which is frequent, can we record that as the Commission as one of your recommendations?
It's one of my very strong recommendations that perhaps the Commission could consider making that at the end. It really is something I've considered, and I'm duly making that recommendation that there be a dialogue, maybe once a year or maybe once in 2 years, so that we bury deeper and deeper all these things that have happened in the past, and in their space we water the tree of peace, of broadening understanding of the meaning of democracy, and actually showcase the joys of democracy in our province.
Yes.
And even the kind of dialoguing to resolve political differences and containing them. And affording the people of this province space where they could make regular submissions to say, this is what we've been experiencing in the past year or 2 years. Because at times in a particular given area, violence tend to take place over a long period, with us only occasionally reacting and not actually coming up with something substantial in terms of resolving that. That could be a steady way and a continuously available platform for dialoguing and taking the people of the province on board. I make that point.
Thank you.
Of course, I do, as I've made a comment, that some initiatives do get taken by government briefly from time to time around elections. And it should be noted that KwaZulu-Natal has never, to the best of my knowledge, had political killings-free election, to the best of my knowledge. We have never had a situation where we go for a round of elections, whether local or general, and during the campaign, up to the day of elections, there isn't anybody who lose their lives as a result of political killing. So, in a way, I'm saying the province is still experiencing political killings during campaigning. Up to 1996, and during the elections campaign, political killings were mostly between parties, political parties. The state now has basically disappeared as a driver of political killings, gradually from 1994 up to now. So these are the points that I'm submitting. Now let's deal with political killings from 2011. In other words, this is how I close the gap between the periods at hand. Political killings in the province have now taken a new turn. The phenomenon is within and around the African National Congress. Still targeted local politicians. In other words, still targeted, but this time with local politicians falling victim, and increasingly so. I hope I'm making myself very clear. So it's a new turn with the phenomenon being within and around the African National Congress, but still targeted, except that now local politicians are the victims, and this is on the increase. Let me indicate a few factors as I pick them up in my verbal interactions with affected individuals and affected communities and so on. And sometimes I pick these things up when people make a call, and I'm always now available for calls, it seems, because I'm unemployed, so people know that I'm not going to say I'm in meetings and so on. So they just freely call. And I get to understand more and more, including immediately after some of these ongoing incidents. And sometimes I go there and interact with them. In the main, people who have been targets in the period, that is from 2011 up to now, are councillors, are potential councillors, and I make a difference between a councillor and a potential councillor. branch leadership of the African National Congress, including those who operated sub-regions. There's some level in the hierarchy of the ANC that we call sub-region and zones in the case of eThekwini, where a number of branches get clustered and then into a zone or into a sub-region outside of eThekwini. And this also includes influential and prominent politicians at a local level. So it could be a councillor, it could be a potential councillor, it could be a leader in a zone or a sub-region, or you could just be prominent or influential, but you are not a councillor, you are not in these structures. So this is the category of people that I think are in the receiving end at this particular point in time. Let me just confine myself to issues around councillors and potential councillors. These are being councillor is something that is easily accessible. Paying public position for most of the people at local level. That's the first point that I make. You don't have to have any academic qualification. You don't have to have whatever money. It comes to you when it's election time that you can make yourself available, and you can find yourself from a position where you are not getting anything in the form of income, and suddenly get yourself some income. So it's easily available. But because it is easily accessible and it's paying, it is gradually becoming highly competitive. It's no exaggeration that at any given point you can find up to 10 people competing to be a councillor in a ward, or to be a PR councillor, or people wanting to become PR councillors in the same area. So the point is, competition is very high. And it promises double growth. One growth is in terms of your social status. You become somebody all of a sudden. When you are a councillor, you suddenly get respected. Even by people in their weddings, you get acknowledged. Even in functions, even if there are birthday functions, you are the most available public figure at a local level.
Yes.
As a councillor. So you get the status. You even become conscious of it in terms of your dress code. Even your family and your immediate families, they become associated with the councillor, and you get a status, social. But on the other hand, it also pays financial, because you are getting income directly in the form of an allowance or a salary. That's the first scenario. The second one about this, if you are associated with, firstly, the campaign of a councillor, and your councillor of choice becomes a winner, you, not the councillor himself or herself now, but if you are in the inner circle of a councillor, because you influenced, you supported, from that inner circle outwards, in layers, and there are those layers. You can easily and ordinarily identify them, but there are those layers. There is a person who would be number one in a councillor in terms of closeness.
Yes.
From the old days of identifying you as a councillor, giving you support, influencing other people, and actually delivering you as a councillor. That circle, that's how it forms. There's benefit for you, depending, notwithstanding where you are in the circle around the councillor. Because it puts you next in line, in inverted commas. So you would soon or later get to be a member of the branch executive, or in a zone or a sub-region, or even in the REC. It goes like that. Either you are in those positions and then you influence a situation where so-and-so becomes a councillor, or you influence things that so-and-so becomes a councillor, and then you get to the structures. It goes like that, in a way. So it benefits. Thirdly, proximity to tenders or proximity to power broking, to a power broking position within the political power ladder. This in turn brings the honor to offer employment and, of course, other favors. So when you are a councillor, when you become a councillor, you are in a close proximity for awarding tenders, either formally or informally, directly or indirectly. So it has benefits. Or you become a power...
I'm sorry to interrupt. How does it operate indirectly?
It operates indirectly because as a councillor, you know what is going to come up in your discussions in formal council meetings. You know when what tender is going to be out, where, for how much, all those details you have. And you then informally go to potential interested parties. You get to them and to say, you know what, there is this tender coming. I thought I should just inform you. If sometimes conversations can go on to say, can you get me papers, or can you brief me more, or can you link me up? So, in that way. And then it proceeds on and on. What is there for me, and all those things. But this is how it happens informally. So this is a benefit. But there's another syndrome. You remember the reason why I'm outlining these things is how tensions unintentionally develop, because you compete in all these processes. But the other factor in the competition is the syndrome, which we can call my or our turn to eat has come. There is that syndrome. It doesn't have a chairman or a secretary, but it's a movement, a periodical movement. It's unidentifiable. But you do become conscious of it. it's our turn to eat. And it becomes very powerful. It can move a woman or a man. And it can throw you on the other side. My turn or our turn to eat. Let me move to the other one, to the other factor, underlying factor, and how it manifests. This is manipulation and factionalism within the ANC. I'm now on issues that I say are internal or around the African National Congress. When positions within the organizations are available through manipulation, mostly based on factions, it becomes a factor in potential violence, sometimes which develops into full violence. The benefit that I've spoken about from the practice, from this practice of factionalism and manipulation, often go to the manipulating individual or faction in the form of guarantees for continued support. If you are in a position at regional level or even at provincial level, as a powerful individual or an individual in a powerful position, or with a grouping, an inner grouping of yourself in that particular position, you benefit when you manipulate. And you also benefit via your faction when you manipulate. And what do you benefit? For you, it's continued support from the beneficiary of manipulation. Well, the fellow would know that I'm here because things were manipulated to my favor.
Yes.
And then I must pay via continued support. And then the fellow who sits somewhere will always benefit as well via continued support from the ground, which nowadays you feel is necessary over and above or even despite ordinary appeal to the electorate and to membership. The practice often sees lists manipulated. You know, in the NC, there's a system of selecting a councillor. You go to the PGM, you go to community, you go to a selection panel. That at local government, you go through all those stages. It's possible that even if you come number one, you come as number one in all these selection processes, you still can't be a councillor, or you can still not be number one in the list in your PR list.
Yes.
Where ordinarily you would have been number one. But because you are not in a particular faction, the list gets manipulated in one way or the other. And this is aside from balancing gender, which is something that has been accepted long ago in the African National Congress as a matter of principle. But over and above that, and despite that, outside of that, there exists a system of manipulation.
Mr. Mchunu, at what level or levels is this manipulation?
You go through, let me explain further how it takes place, because it takes place at different levels.
Yes.
This practice often sees lists manipulated in line with factional preferences. Manipulation is a highly involved rot. It includes the following. It includes sometimes manipulating membership. So long before time or that there's going to be a branch meeting, and in order to get to the meeting, the elective meeting, you manipulate membership so that the people who get in are those on the list, in other words, the voters' roll.
Yes.
But then you manipulate it such that those who are in majority are the ones that are going to ensure a particular outcome that is predetermined.
Yes.
That's the first level. So you can do that. The other one is via deployment. There's something called deployment. When there's going to be an elective meeting in a branch, you send somebody, you give them a particular brief in terms of what outcome is wanted by whoever.
Yes.
So you brief the person, when you come back, you must come back with so and so, or with this kind of result. You then design tactics. You will point at so and so, they will be ready, they've been briefed, they will sit this side or that side. So all those things, there are those things. You brief a deployee, including briefing a deployee to say, when you see that things are not in your favor, call the meeting off, saying for one reason or the other. Call it non-correct. Or a correcting meeting, say it's non-correct. You are the designated official. Just use your brazen power to say, irregardless of the actual counting, just be brazen and say, it's non-correct, and then go out, leave. Or say, it is correcting when it is not correcting. When everybody can see it's not correcting, you say it is correcting because you have that assumed power. There's manipulation. Then it also happens, as I say, by pointing nominations in meetings. You point at nominators. You say, when people raise hands, you don't ordinarily point. You point at people with a particular understanding. I'm pointing at you now. You are going to nominate so and so, and then I point at you. You are going to support this, and then I say, yeah, close or something like that. And then you also do it through counting. You count hands. You say, Moreane has the majority, when actually Moreane has the minority. And you look at people in a brazen way. You say, this is the result. The one who has a lesser number, you tell them that he or she actually has a bigger number.
Yes.
Fortunately, I don't have any ambitions for public office.
I take the point. It's merely an example. All right. But you also do manipulation through placements on rationalized lists. Once lists have been compiled and they are submitted somewhere, you're a committee or whatever, you start balancing them, you change them. Not using the actual results that as they came to you, you juggle them. Number one becomes number two, or number 7 or number 4, and so on. You just do it physically. Or you do it through quorums, as I said at the beginning. Sometimes you even do it via venues. You say, in the morning, the venue is a public works office. You tell people, or like yesterday, a few hours before the meeting, you change the venue. You say, no, the venue is now that side. So many people will come this side, and then others will go that other side via social media. And then you go on with the process when others are waiting. Or you send them there, but you come here. It does happen. It has happened in the past.
I suppose, based on your evidence, those who are misled, it will depend on which faction they are.
Definitely. It will depend. And so people who are here finally belong to one faction and they elect and then they go. Sometimes in one branch you are able to get two submissions. One submission saying the meeting never said. And then on the other, no, the meeting said. We were in such and such a place. No, this one was not there. And indeed you were not there. Then this one says, no, but how could I not be there? Because I was there. This is what we got. No, the venue changed. There was this and that and so on. So you do this manipulation to manipulate overall final results. So it's difficult to say exactly it all happens at this particular stage because it happens at various stages and so on. But sometimes it happens via times for scheduled meetings. You say the meeting is at 10, but it's actually at 3. Or you say it's at 3, but it took place at 10. So you don't change the venue, but you change the times. But at times you also do it by intimidation. Around Durban, there was something that we got to know, something called bouncers. I come from a rural area, so I've never come across a bouncer. You call a meeting of the ANC where you expect ANC members to be present, those who qualify, but then enter a bouncer. Now, I asked one fellow, what's a bouncer? They say a bouncer is a physically big and visible male with intimidating eyes and body, who is sent for the purpose, depending on what the brief is. He would take you out of a meeting at the whim of the person who directs him. And so sometimes it's a person you have never seen in the area or in a meeting of the ANC. You see them all of a sudden dressed for the purpose and so on. So we use those people called bouncers. You can also call police at times. You call police. You say, there are some people that you would need to take out. And depending on your influence on police, they come and do the job. Either municipal police, or even in some cases, SAPS. Or your own particular personal security, your bodyguards. Or a private security company you are associated with as an individual or as a faction.
Yes.
So these are all new kind of tendencies that were not there before. That were not, I mean, incidental, there could be a fight or what, but now, you know, there are all these mechanisms to get desired results. Now, I think I've dealt with...
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Would you describe that as a sort of a physical way of gatekeeping?
It is a form of that. It is one form of that, because sometimes there are people who qualify to be at the meeting, but because you didn't include them on a list of the voters' roll, deliberately so, then they are kept outside. And then to guarantee that they are not going to come, you use a bouncer or any of your security apparatus that's available.
Mr. Mchunu, Chairperson, I propose that we only adjourn for lunch once Mr. Mchunu is done with his evidence. May I, at the stage, then propose a 15-minute tea break? After that, we'll continue until he's done.
Yes. The Commission will adjourn for about 15 minutes. A comfort break. Thanks.